chapter is respiration in plants. So in the last classes we have discussed photosynthesis. Both the chapters comes under the plant physiology. So the line of the NCERT we will go through. So what is saying that all of us breathe to live, but why is breathing so essential to the life? What happens when we breathe? Also, do all living organisms, including plant and microbes, breathe? If so, then how it is? See, the in case of a physiology, it will go through either it in case of human or in the plants or in very little microscopic uh, organism. The process, the physiology process means everyone requires the respiration. They requires the food for their energy requirement. All they having the same, but the process is different. The organelle is different. The organelle involved in the process is different. Some are the tissue level, some are the cellular level, some are the organ system, organ level, and these are the things. In case of the plant part, exactly how the respiration, like our respirations starting with started with that means nasal activity and then going to the lungs, bronchi. These are the things are going through. In case of plants, how it is? Is that the plant does the respiration or only the photosynthesis? There is a misconception in many people, in the layman people, that plants do not breathe. Okay, because they only release the oxygen. Okay, so in this chapter we will discuss all the things. Okay, how the plants do the respirations and what is the process of breakdown of glucose and all these things. So if we will break down this word respiration. So what do you mean by the respiration? Is that the breakdown of a food and release of energy? If we will go through that, then it is because when the glucose is breaking down, the energy is released. If the food is broken down, your energy is released. Okay. In these sentences, you will go through, and this is the all living organisms see the need the energy for carrying out the daily activities, be it absorption, transport, movement, reproduction, or even breathing. Where do all energy come from? We know that we eat food for the energy, but how this energy taken from the food? The question is, we know that we take generally, if you will ask any grade 3, grade 4 student why you are taking food, then he will answer, sir, for energy for do the day-to-day activities we require food. But really is that directly if you have a plate of I will give you a plate of rice, then can you give me some amount of energy from that? So how this actually division is means how this breakdown is happening. Okay. So how this energy is utilized? Do all the foods give the same amount of energy? Means so is saying that how this means all the type of foods means if the carbohydrate food, the energy coming from the carbohydrate food is the same as the energy coming from the proteinous food. Is it the same is coming same energy is coming from the uh, fat based food? So then the question is saying that do the plants eat? So how they are eating? So if you are not seeing any ingestion outside ingestion like our mouth we have. So where do plants get their energy from? So and microorganisms for their energy requirement. Do they eat food? So you may wonder the several questions raised above. They may seem to be very disconnected. But in reality, the process of breathing is much connected to the process of a release of energy from the food. Let us try to understand how this happens. Okay. So all this energy required for the life process is obtained by the oxidation of some macromolecules. Okay. So what is macro means large molecule. Okay. Macro means large, micro means small. So macromolecules that we call food. Green plants and cyanobacteria can prepare their own food. You know that is the process of a photosynthesis. Okay, so by the process of photosynthesis, we're saying that they trap the light energy and convert it to chemical energy that is stored in the bonds of a carbohydrate like glucose, sucrose, and starch. So in case of plants, the photosynthesis, we have learned that this photosynthesis, what exactly happening? Now it is using the carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide and water to get it from the glucose, and this glucose is stored in the form of starch in the plants. So we must remember that in green plants too, not all the cell, tissues, and organ do the photosynthesis. Only containing the cells containing chloroplastation, or that those who have in the grana, stroma, thylakoid membrane. Okay, the particular organelle is involved in that case. They are the most often located in the superficial layer carry out the photosynthesis. Hence, even in the green plants, all other organ, tissue, and cell are non-green, need food for the oxidation. Hence, food has to be translocated to all the non-green parts. By ways like the water is transported to the xylem, and generally in case of a tree, the food is translocated to the phloem. You know that. So, in case of ants, food is translocated to all the non-green plants. Animal are heterotrophic, they obtain food from the plants directly, that is called herbivores, or indirectly by the carnivores. Okay. The saprophytes like fungi dependent on the dead and decaying matter. What is important to recognize that ultimately all need the food that is required for the life process comes from the photosynthesis. Here, the statement is that what is important to recognize that ultimately all the food that is required for the life processes comes from the photosynthesis. Like as the photosynthesis is the it's like the that generally we say that these are the kitchen of our ecosystem. Okay, so here what happens, the photosynthesis is giving the food to the plant. So plant as it is transported through the food chain. So this chapter deals with the cellular respiration, how the respiration happens in the cell level, how the a mechanism of a breakdown of a food materials within the cell to release energy, and the trapping of energy for synthesis of ATP. So this chapter, in this respiration chapter, what we will discuss now is the cellular respiration. What is cellular respiration? Or it is saying the mechanism of a breakdown of food material. I said now what is respiration? The breakdown of a food material within the cell and the release of energy and trapping this energy for synthesis of ATP. Okay. So ATP is nothing but it is a currency, means the energy storing, where the energy stored. This chapter deals with the cellular respiration or the mechanism, or sorry, cellular respiration. What is cellular respiration or the mechanism of a breakdown? So the what breakdown he is telling about? He is saying about the breakdown of a food or the breakdown of glucose in case of plant within the cell, in cell, to release the energy and trapping this energy for the synthesis of a ATP. I think you understood. If you any doubt, raise your hand. Okay. Now, in case of a photosynthesis, of course, takes place within the chloroplast in the eukaryotes, whereas the breakdown of a complex molecule to yield energy takes place in the cytoplasm or in the mitochondria, also only in the eukaryotes. So generally in the grade 10 life process, if you will go through, then there is completely, it is NCERT is written how this respiration happens. There is given the basics of respiration in the grade 10 NCERT. Is saying that where the breakdown of a complex molecule, this breakdown of a complex molecule to yield energy takes place in cytoplasm and mitochondria. There generally it is the breakdown of glucose. There are one very good diagrammatic representation is given in the grade 10 NCERT, where he is saying that in cytoplasm what is happening, in mitochondria what is happening, in yeast cell what is happening, and in another I think without presence of oxygen and absence of oxygen. In these things are given in a very good in a diagram representation in grade 10 NCERT. So please go to that. Okay. So the breaking of a carbon-carbon bond of a complex compound through the oxidation within the cell, leading to the release of a considerable amount of energy, is called as respiration. What he's saying that if you will go through the a bit scientific definition of this respiration, he's saying that the breaking down of a carbon-carbon bond means the breaking down of glucose. Glucose is that C6H12O6. Okay, so what happening in that, in this carbon-carbon bond is broken down of a complex compound through the oxidation process, means that oxidation and reduction, if you have gone through, oxidation means the addition of oxygen. So there is or you can say that on the presence of oxygen these things are happening, means the carbon carbon bond is broken down on the presence of oxygen. Okay. within the cells, what hଉଛି na within the cells, leading to release. What release? This broken down of carbon carbon bond on the presence of oxygen, which leads or which releases the energy. Okay, considerable amount of energy is called as respiration. So ultimately, if you will ultimately if we say to the layman concept, the breaking down of a food that is released in case of a photosynthesis in the plant to breakdown of glucose in the plants to release energy, means the breakdown of a food to release the energy. In case of a bit more scientific terms, in case of a respiration, if you will go to, then he's saying that the breaking down of a carbon carbon bonds of a complex compounds. What complex compounds? This is glucose through the oxidation process. Through the oxidation process means there is oxygen is involved or the presence of oxygen. What is happening? What is happening in that case? Now the considerable amount of energy is released. That process, the whole process of breaking down of the carbon-carbon bond in the presence of oxygen, on the presence of oxygen, um, is called as the respiration. Okay. Voice audible, hosta?
Again.
Okay, okay, fine. So then what is saying, the compounds that are oxidized during the process is known as respiratory substance. What is saying that the compounds that are oxidized during this process, okay, so those compounds are oxidized during this process is known as respiratory substrate. Usually carbohydrates are oxidized to release energy, but sometimes proteins and fat or even organic acid can be used as the respiratory substances in some plants under some certain conditions. Generally, what happens, the carbohydrates are oxidized. You know that because in case of this, what is saying, the breaking up CC band of complex compound, what is in case of that glucose or starch or in the carbohydrate, these carbohydrates generally undergoing the oxidation process. But sometimes proteins, fat, even organic acids can be used as a respiratory substance in some plants under some certain conditions. During oxidation within a cell, all the energy contained in a respiratory substrate is not released free into the cell or in a single step. So what happens is saying that during the oxidation within a cell, during this oxidation process is going through, all the energy contained in the respiratory substrate, that energy that is stored in the respiratory substrate. What is respiratory substrate? Now the compound that are oxidized during the process. Yes or no? So in that respiratory substrate, whatever the energy is stored, that is not released free into the cell. Okay, or in a single step, it will not release. It is released in a series of a slow stepwise reaction controlled by the enzymes, and it is trapped as a chemical energy in the form of ATP. I think you understood what he is saying there. This respiratory substrate, when the carbohydrates is undergoing through the oxidation process, there is a considerable amount of energy will be released. But he's saying that this respiratory substance which stores energy will not release in a single step, or it will not release like completely. It's saying that it will not release into the cell, or in not release like a completely, like a glass of water you are drinking completely. No, it's not like that. It will go like how you are drinking a completely hot food, like that he is taking. Okay, so like that you are taking the how your food you are taking by the by blowing the food, like that he is taking, means the process is followed by the step by step. And how the step by step process will be followed? Now the step by step process will be followed by the help of the enzymes, or by the help of the biocatalyst. Okay, and this chemical energy, this energy will not directly put to the we will not put the cell, it will be stored in form of ATP. Hence it is important to understand the energy released by the oxidation in respiration is not usually directed but used to synthesize ATP. So what exactly this energy is released from this substrate, respiratory substrate, is not used directly but used to synthesize ATP. which is broken down whenever the energy needs to be utilized. Means that ATP is stored whenever there is a requirement by the cell. Whenever there is a requirement by the cell, this ATP will be synthesized so that the energy requirement can be targeted. So hence ATP acts as a, what is saying, hence ATP acts as the energy currency of the cell. So that's why I'm saying that's why it is called as the energy currency of the cell. This energy trapped in the ATP utilized in various energy requiring processes, like in the day-to-day process, like that it requires to do the photosynthesis. Everywhere where is the energy is required to do the day-to-day activities, to do the physiology of the plant. In that, this ATP are used. Okay. So what is saying that and the carbon skeleton produced during the respiration used as a precursor for biosynthesis for the other molecules in the cell. Whatever the carbon that carbon skeleton is producing in this case of respiration will be used as a precursor, okay, for the biosynthesis of other molecules which is required in the cell. So I think you understood this thing. So now we will go to do the plants breathe. Okay. Before going, I have prepared a bit presentation in that case. If you will please go through it. Okay. It's saying that the breaking of a carbon-carbon single bond of a complex compounds through the oxidation within the cells, leading to release of a considerable amount of energy, and the trapping of this energy for synthesis of ATP is called as the cellular respiration that we have discussed in the NCERT. So what happens in case first photosynthesis happen by the green plants, then the synthesis of sugar has been done by the process of photosynthesis. Now these sugars in this complex CC bond will go for the oxidation process. In that oxidation process, it will be released some respiratory substrate. In that respiratory substrate, whatever the considerable amount is released, that will be stored in case of ATP, and that process is called as the cellular respiration. Okay. During cellular respiration or oxidation within a cell, all the energy contained in the compound is not released in a single step, because in single, if complete energy is released, it may be converted into heat. Yes or no? So the energy during cellular respiration is released in a series of slow steps with the help of enzymes or controlled by the enzymes, and it is trapped, whatever the energy is trapped in the chemical form that is called as the ATP. So ATP does synthesize, whatever the ATP synthesized in this process is broken down whenever or wherever there is energy need to be utilized. Hence ATP acts as the energy currency of the cell. Why ATP is energy currency of cell? Because whenever there is a requirement of energy, this will be synthesized and it will give the energy. It will not directly release to the cell. That the NCERT is, you have seen that the energy will not be directly to be released to the cell, or the energy will not be released in a single step. It will be controlled by the help of enzymes. The compounds that are oxidized during the process of cellular respiration are called as respiratory substrate, and these are usually carbohydrate, but except these, I said that there are some exception are always there. So fats, protein, organic acid are sometimes used according to the need. Primarily carbohydrate, mainly glucose, are used for the respiratory substrate that is released in case of photosynthesis. In the absence of a less availability of a carbohydrate, respiratory substrate can be fats or proteins. Okay. So these are the respiratory substrate, gross calorific value, and what is the physiological value. If carbohydrate, it will be, then it will be 4.1 kilocalorie per gram. For physiological value is 4.0. So protein and fat. Okay. The sequence of respiratory substrate will be carbohydrate, fat, and protein. So organic acid such as malic acid can be used as also a respiratory substrate in some plants under certain conditions. Okay. So features of cellular respiration, say that cellular respiration is a amphibolic process. Why? Reason is that the carbon skeleton intermediate of respiration, mean in each respiration steps we got some substrate. the substrate produced during the respiration use. What is this substrate? We will see in the next some of the slides or in next NCRT lines. We will go through the what exactly this carbon skeleton process. Carbon skeleton. Okay. So during this respiration is used for the precursor of biosynthesis of other molecules in the cell. Cellular respiration is the exogenic process reason the breaking of C-C bond complex through the oxidation within the cell leading to the release of a considerable amount of energy. Okay, exothermic generally it is a process. So you know that in case of photosynthesis it is a endothermic process. Their light energy is required to release to produce what for glucose. But in case of respiration it is a exothermic process because here carbon carbon bond will be broken down on the presence of oxygen to release to release energy. When there is a release of energy, the process is chemical reaction is generally exothermic in nature. Okay, so let's go to the NCRT again. I think you understood. Okay, now comes to the do the plants breathe? Well, the answer to this question is quite so direct. Okay, yes, plants require oxygen for the respiration to occur, and they also give out the carbon dioxide. Okay, so hence plant have system in place that ensure the availability of oxygen. Okay, so plants, unlike animals, have no specialized organ for gaseous exchange, but they have stomata and lenticles. Stomata present in the leaf surface and lenticles in the stem. There are several reasons why plants get along without respiratory organs. First, each plant part take place care of its own gas exchange needs. There is a very little transport of gases from one plant to part of another. Second, plants do not present great demands for gas exchange. So, like we require a great exchange of gas, they don't require. Second, plants do not present gone. Roots, stems, and leaves respire at a rate far lower than the animals do. So only during the photosynthesis as a large volume of gases exchange, and each leaf is well adapted to take care of its own needs during these periods. Like there is a what stomata opening and closing, you know that. When cells photosynthesis, availability of oxygen is not a problem in these cells since oxygen is released within the cell. Third, the distance that gases must diffuse even in large, bulky plants is not great. Even each living cell in a plant located quite close to the surface of the plant. So this is true for leaves, you may ask, but what about the thick woody stems and roots? In that case, living cells organize the thin layers in the beneath of that. They also have opening called as a lenticle that I said already. That stomata in the case of leaf and these of root and stem. These lenticles generally process the gaseous exchanges. The cell in interior are dead and provide only mechanical support. You know that the tissues, parenchymus, collenchymus, and sclerenchymus. These only for they are giving the primary work of the complex as sorry what is that permanent tissues is only give the generally it is give to mechanical support. Thus most of cells of a plant have at least a part of their surface in contact with air. This is also facilitated by the loose packing of a parenchyma cell in the leaves, stems, and roots, which provide an interconnected network of air spaces. Okay. So generally, these sclerenchymus and collenchymus are generally gives the mechanical support. In the frontal part of the parenchymus tissue, there are some intercellular spaces are present. If you will go through the tissue chapter, you will study the complete combustion of glucose. Okay, complete combustion means, you know what is combustion? Combustion means uh, the complete combustion. Combustion, if you will go to the combustion, there is a chapter in grade 8, I think, grade 7 or grade 8, combustion and flame. Okay, so what is combustion means? In the presence of oxygen is something is broken down. Okay, so like in case of in gas, if you are burning in your home, for a combustion what exactly required? There is a presence of oxygen is required and a combustible substance is required. Those who can be burnt and the presence of oxygen. So the complete combustion of glucose which produces So always when there is a combustion on the presence of oxygen, there will be release of carbon dioxide and water and energy in case of when the glucose is going through. So carbon dioxide is really now if you are thinking in case of at your home, taking as example, when you are preparing the food, the gas is burning, what is happening? Generally the energy is coming out. Okay, that heat is a form of energy. If this energy is to be useful to the cell, it should be able to utilize the synthesize the other molecule that the cell requires. The strategy that the plant cell uses to catabolize the glucose molecule in such a way that not all liberated energy goes out as heat. The key is to oxidize glucose not in one step, that I have already said. Is the key is to oxidize glucose. Glucose means here is that you have seen in that in carbon bond. Here is saying that glucose not in the one step but in several small steps, enabling some step to be just large enough such that energy release can be coupled to the ATP synthesis. So how it is done essentially is the story of total whole story of respiration. So during this process of respiration, oxygen is utilized, carbon dioxide and water and energy are released as the product. Okay. So oxygen is utilized and what is the product is the carbon dioxide, water, energy. The combustion requires oxygen, but some cell live where oxygen may or may not be available. You know that in the grade 10, I think NCRT that is the NCRT have written of aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Huh? So So can you think such situation an organism where O2 is not available? So you know that in grade 10 NCERT is also written that muscle cramp. Huh? So in that case, how the oxygen is not available in that case. Okay. So there are sufficient reason to believe that the first cell of the planet lived in the atmosphere that lacked oxygen. Even among present day living organisms, we know several that are adapted to the anaerobic conditions also. Some of these organisms are facultative anaerobic. Okay. Uh, which requirement of anaerobic condition is obligate. In any case, all living organisms retain the enzymatic machinery to partially oxidize the glucose without the help of oxygen. The breakdown of glucose to the pyruvic acid. So, first step of breakdown of glucose to the pyruvic acid generally happens in the cytoplasm of every cell. In case of a plant, in case of a human, everywhere the glycolysis happens in the what generally glucose to pyruvic acid is in the cytoplasm. Okay. The term glycolysis has originated from Greek word glycos for sugar and lysis for the splitting. So how the glucose generally spills. So that's why this I'm saying that glycolysis. Before going to that, let's go through the PowerPoint presentation what we have written. So plant, unlike animals, no have specialized organs for the gaseous sections, but they have stomata and lenticles for the propulsion. Okay. So there are several reasons why plant can get along without respiratory organs. First, each part of the plant take care of own gaseous section needs. There is very little transport of gases from one part to another. Second, that I have already discussed these 3 points in the NCRT. Here, type of respiration. There are generally two types of respiration. On the basis of a respiratory substrate and on the basis of a presence or absence of oxygen. On basic respiratory substrate, that is called as one is called as floating respiration. What is floating respiration? Now, when the carbohydrate or fat are oxidized in the inside the cell, carbohydrates and fats are floating. Inclusion of a cell thus is called as the floating respiration. So, what is protoplasmic respiration? When the protein is oxidized inside the cell. This occurs at the starved cell. Protein is the constituent of protoplasm, thus it is called as the protoplasmic respiration. Okay. When generally the carbohydrate or fat oxidized, that is called floating respiration. When the protein is going under the oxidation, then it is called as the protoplasmic respiration. Now, in the case of presence or absence of oxygen, that will be one is aerobic, another is anaerobic. Okay. If you will go to the difference of aerobic and anaerobic respiration, okay. So here, uh, in aerobic respiration is saying that this accounts for the complete oxidation or the complete combustion. It is saying that in that NCERT line is saying the complete combustion of oxygen, sorry, complete combustion of glucose. So this means in case of aerobic, this accounts for the complete oxidation in product or inorganic or of a food, okay, glucose to carbon dioxide and H2O. This accounts for only a partial breakdown of glucose either in a lactic acid or ethanol or CO, carbon dioxide. Okay, this generally happens. Some are happens in the yeast cell, some are happens in the muscle cells of our body, means human. Okay, so it is a intermolecular respiration, is intramolecular respiration. Inter and intra, I think you know that. Here 36 or 38 molecules of ATP gain for each molecule of glucose. Okay, there is no there is gain of only 2 molecule of ATP. Okay, there is some substrate level for phosphorylation. Okay, these you will study in the next NCERT chapters. Okay, here NADH is oxidized to NAD plus vigorously. Here NADH oxidates slowly. Oxygen remove hydrogen from the system and act as a final hydrogen acceptor. Here oxygen is absent. Hydrogen acceptor system is either acetaldehyde over here or during the alcoholic fermentation or pyruvate during the lactic acid fermentation. Okay. So reaction is given over here and the reaction is given over here. Okay. So these are the things. So now comes to the glycolysis. Okay. So the term glycolysis is originated from the Greek word that I have already said before, that is glycose and lysis. So glycose means it is a sugar, and lysis means it is splitting. What is splitting now? This carbon-carbon splitting. The scheme of glycolysis is given by Gustav Emden, means Mirov and J. Parnas. Okay, so that is that's why it is called also as EMP pathway. Okay. So E, that is government embedded, then M for Meshov and J for Parnas. Okay, but Mayor of whatever that name. Okay, typical names. Okay, so remember that is EMP pathway. Okay, embedded Otto Mayorov and J Parnas. In anaerobic organism, it is only process of respiration. Glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell. Generally asks question, glycolysis occurs. The location generally asks the question. Remember that it is cytoplasm of the cell and is present in all living organisms. This is glycolysis in all living organisms. In this process, glucose undergoes the partial oxidation to form a 6-carbon compound. This glucose is a 6-carbon compound to form 3-carbon compound, that is pyruvic acid. This glucose is derived from the sucrose. Okay, so if you will say that how, sir, this sucrose is being divided to glucose. Okay, so in that case, give me a moment. So it's a sucrose is generally disaccharide. Okay, from that the that this what you can say that this glucose. Okay, glucose and fructose is generally divided from the split from there. Okay, that's why he's saying that lysis for splitting. Okay, so these in that case it's these glucose and fructose are monosaccharides. Okay, so glucose enter to the glycolysis after photophosphorylation. Okay, to the glucose 6 phosphate. So there is generally in case of sucrose there is a that alpha, there is alpha and beta. Okay, there is a one is alpha D glucose and another is beta D fructose. Okay, that generally binds with the one enzyme that is called invertase. Okay, so in that case that is a water is being carried out in that in water in hydrogen generally going under the hydrolysis. This glucose is going under the what that hydrolysis, and that water is being is required for the splitting this process. Okay, so in that case that is a invertase enzyme is being used to do the splitting. Okay, So we'll study, but it's not the detail, but if you will go through the Tej Jaeger book, means plant physiology, you can get it. Okay, how it happens. So first step is what, and you know that it means the what is glycolysis? The uh, breakdown of a 6 carbon compound glucose to the 3 carbon compound pyruvic acid. Okay. Now here, this glucose is derived from the sucrose, which is the end product of photosynthesis, or uh, from the storage of a carbohydrate. Generally, what happens? This glucose is stored as in the carbohydrate, okay, in form of sucrose. Sucrose is converted into glucose and fructose by the enzyme called as the invertase. Okay, that I said. Okay, and these two monosaccharides, which two monosaccharides? This glucose and fructose. Okay, readily enter to the glycolytic pathway. Okay, this glycolytic pathway, these are entering the glycolytic pathway. Glucose and fructose are phosphorylated. Phosphorylated means in there is a synthesis of a ATP. Okay, to give rise to glucose 6 phosphate. Okay, when there is a when there will be there will be ATP synthesized in any process, the enzyme is generally kinase. Okay, kinase activity happens. Okay, if you will again, if you will go to the details how exactly the kinase activity happens. Okay, so uh, the kinase there will be a magnesium ion is required for the kinase activity. Okay, so give me a moment. The function of enzyme kinase is what exactly kinase is doing. Kinase is transferring one phosphate group. Okay, from what this glucose 6 phosphate is glucose is written, glucose to glucose 6 phosphate. So this transfer that phosphate from where? From ATP. Okay, this is from ATP to ATP. So ATP plus 1P. Yes or no? So adenoside triphosphate to adenoside diphosphate. Okay, and the one phosphate is there. That one phosphate, where is adding this glucose to glucose 6 phosphate. Okay, understanding my point? So there will be addition. Kinase is transfer a phosphate group from usually from ATP to the specific substrate. Specific substrate is where this glucose 6 phosphate. Okay, understood? I'm asking, understood or not?
I get it.
Here what happens? Glucose to glucose 6 phosphate is written. Here the enzyme is used as the uh, kinase enzyme is used as a kinase. Okay, so what exactly kinase is doing? This adenoside triphosphate to adenoside diphosphate. So one phosphate group is releasing from this ATP and adding over this glucose 6. Okay, so glucose 6, the glucose is a 6 carbon compound, and this kinase is used to glucose 6 phosphate. See here over here. So glucose and fructose are phosphorylated to give glucose 6 phosphate by the activity of enzyme hexokinase. Okay, hexo means 6. Okay, hexokinase. Okay, this phosphorylated form of glucose then isomerized means what? Fructose 6 phosphate. Okay, this fructose 6 phosphate. Okay, uh, give me a moment.
The
Glucose to
glucose.
glucose 6 phosphate to glucose to glucose 6 phosphate, glucose 6 phosphate to fructose 6 phosphate. Okay, fine. Saying that then glucose and fructose are phosphorylated to give rise glucose 6 phosphate by the activity of enzyme hexokinase. Then this glucose 6 phosphate to fructose 6 phosphate, the both are the isomers. Okay, so that enzyme is used as isomerase. Okay, so this phosphorylated form of the glucose then isomerase to fructose 6 phosphate. Okay, fine. If you a bit required over here, you have to go through this presentation. Okay, now you see this diagram is better. Now see, this one is the glucose. Okay, so glucose to glucose 6 phosphate, the enzyme used over here is hexokinase. Here magnesium ion is required to do the division. Okay, fine. To this magnesium, what is the requirement of this magnesium ion? I'm telling you. So this magnesium binds to the neutralize the negative charge of ATP, because generally what exactly happens, the ATP are generally highly negative charged. Okay, So to stabilize that negative charge, this magnesium plus plus, okay, magnesium plus 2 is there, is required there to stabilize the to neutralize the ATP. Okay, so this magnesium is required. So then glucose to glucose 6 phosphate. Then there is a isomerase activity, glucose 6 phosphate to fructose 6 phosphate. Understood? Okay. Now this fructose 6 phosphate to, there will be again here, there will be again phosphorylation. Okay. Here there is a phosphofructo again C kinase. Okay. If you have to remember these things, then you have to remember in case of ATP there is kinase. In case of there is a isomer, glucose 6 phosphate, or that is fructose 6 phosphate to fructose 1,6 phosphate. Okay. Here it is kinase because here ATP is being synthesized. Okay. So that's why. So this is kinase. So everywhere there will be ATP, there will be kinase activity will be there. Okay. Then fructose 6 phosphate to fructose 1,6 bis phosphate. There is a phospho. This is phosphofructokinase. Then fructose 1,6 phosphate. What happens over here? You see over here. You have to go to NCERT. Now we came to here. Fructose 1,6 bis phosphate. Okay. Now this here, what is saying? The various steps of glycolysis are depicted in figure 12.1. In glycolysis, a chain of 10 reactions under the control of different enzymes takes place to produce pyruvate from the glucose. While studying the steps of glycolysis, please note the steps at which utilization or synthesis of ATP in the case of NADH takes place. ATP it utilizes two steps. First, in the conversion of glucose to the glucose 6 phosphate, another is fructose 6 phosphate to fructose 1,6 bis phosphate. Now, this fructose 1,6 bis phosphate, what happens over here? This fructose 1,6 bis phosphate is split to one is PGAL, okay, another is DHAP, okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. Generally, we say that PGAL, and here it is DHAP. Okay, come to here. Now triose phosphate dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Okay, fine. Here it is glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. Generally, we say that PGAL. Okay. Now in that cases, here this NAD, here there is a reduction of NADH plus. Okay. Now what will happen? This PGL, we find there is a one step where NADH plus and H plus will form to the NAD plus. What happen? This hydrogen will be the this hydrogen is whatever is releasing over there. Okay. So this PJ here what happens? This triose phosphate, this is called PJL. What happens here? It is oxidizing. What happens? They having the generally this PJL having 2 electrons and 2 protons. Okay. Now, what will happen when it will go to the oxidation process? Now there will lose electron. Yes or no? The oxidation, you know that what is oxidation? Yes or no? So there will be a losing of electron. Okay. Now this NAD plus will accept 2 electron. Okay, understood? This NAD plus will accept 2 electron. What will happen? It will become NADH. Okay, and one another proton which will be released into the solution. Okay, that's why it is saying that we will find there is a one step where NADH and plus H plus is formed from the NAD plus. This is where the 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde, this PJL, is converted to 1,3 biphosphoglycerate BPGA. Okay, this one is okay 1,3-5-phosphoglycerate acid, and 2 redox equivalent are formed in form of a 2 hydrogen atom. This hydrogen atom from PJL and transferred to a molecule of NAD plus. Okay. And PJL again is oxidized to inorganic phosphate to get converted into BPGA. Okay. Now this 3-phosphoglyceric acid, triose 2 into triose phosphate or 3-phosphoglyceric acid again to the phosphoglycerate. Now in the case of phosphoglycerate to phosphoenol pyruvate, and here another 1,8 phosphorylation is happening over here in the last step where the phosphoenol pyruvate is converted into the pyruvic acid. Okay, the conversion of a BPGA to 3-phosphoglyceric acid PGA. Okay, fine, is also an energy yielding process. This energy is trapped by the formation of ATP. Another ATP is synthesized during the conversion of a PEP, phosphoenol pyruvate, to the pyruvic acid. Now over here you see, where is this is 1,3-biphosphoglyceric acid. Here I think I have been gone to the NCERT. Here what happens? Now this phosphoglycerate, here ADP, there is a kinase, phosphoglycerate kinase. Okay. Then the phosphoglyceric acid, 3-phosphoglyceric acid. Here it is, there is 3-phosphoglycerate to 2-phosphoglycerate. That's why it is mutase, the type of isomerase. Okay. Okay. Now here that is enolase and 2-phosphoenol pyruvic acid to the pyruvic acid. Thus here the pyruvic acid kinase. Here is the magnesium and potassium. Okay. This is here. This is a substrate level phosphorylation. Here is a substrate level phosphorylation. Okay. So here in case of a in case of a in case of a glycolysis, what happen? Glucose plus 4 ADP. Okay. See, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 4 ADP, 2 NAD, 1, and another one is 2 NAD here. Sorry, 2 NADH. Okay. Plus 2 ATP. Okay. In where cytosol means cytoplasm. Okay. There are different enzymes are taking in the enzymes are taking part. But upon 2 pyruvic acid, generally it is 2 pyruvic acid. All are 2. Okay. Here it is glucose 1, 1, 1, 1. From here that is 2, because this one is what you can say that it is which reaction generally comes. A double arrow mark reaction. I'm forgetting the name. What name generally it is? When we are using the double arrow mark, what is the reaction name? Don't know. Reversible reaction. Huh? Okay. So here generally this only one, this PJL you have been forwarded over here. So generally 2 pyruvic acid, 4 ATP, 2 NADH, 2 NADPH2 and 2 ATP we have released. So this is the glycolysis being carried out in the cytoplasm of the cell. Okay. Now fate of pyruvic acid, what happens? That I said that how it happens. If it is glucose, then if it is going to the pyruvic acid, it is named as glycolysis. Okay, glyco, you know that the splitting of a glucose. Okay, common in both aerobic and anaerobic respiration. If O2 is present, then it will go to the acetyl coenzyme cycle, that is called as Krebs cycle. If O2 is absent, either it will form the ethanol or lactic acid. Okay, that is in the cytoplasm. Okay, aerobic respiration where it happens? When the presence of oxygen in mitochondria, when the absence of oxygen in the cytoplasm. So if glucose and pyruvic acid glycolysis always happens in the cytoplasm, if anaerobic respiration is carried through, then it will location is the cytoplasm. If it is aerobic respiration, if oxygen is involved, it is will be occurred in mitochondria. Okay, understood? I think. So now
Yes, yes.
calculate how many ATP molecule will be synthesized in the pathway in one glucose molecule. Tell me. Any doubts? No. Are you there?
Again.
Doubt kichi? Okay. Please go through this. If you are not getting anywhere, mark the there and let me know. Okay, in the next class. Sandeepa ji, Sandeepta ji, ଯଦି କିଛି doubt ଅଛି ପଚାର, otherwise ଯଦି ଥରେ NCERT को line by line ପଢ, then you check that where is the concept is lacking, then you ask me. If any doubt is right now, you can ask me right now.
ପଢିକି doubt ପଚାରିବି। ଆଉଥରେ ପଢିକି ସବୁ details ମାନେ
Okay,
ପଚାରିବି।
fine,
ଆଜ୍ଞା।
that will be great. Okay, taking your leave. Thank you. for joining.
thank you.